I use the gallows humor because my coworkers used it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I ever became dour. And one of the things people used to say is that I kept a very even temper. I actually went gambling once in Tahoe and won at the craps table enough money to buy the Franciscan supplement to my breviary.
Okay.
There you
To
go.
this day, I have that.
I
All
can't say
right.
I've ever heard of someone gambling to get a prayer book. So, Tito, let's play a game.
Okay.
There are 100 numbers between 1 and 100. 99 of them, if you pick them, will give $1 million worth of food to starving children around the world.
Okay.
One of them will take all that money away and destroy an orphanage.
Okay.
Let's start guessing numbers. Let's see how many you want to guess. I
How
have
many?
one written down right here. This is the bad number.
Okay. How many I want to guess? So I just start guessing and
Just
stop.
start guessing. Yeah,
Okay. 21,
you're good. $1 million.
22.
You're good.
I'm going to keep going until I reach like 80.
Okay.
Let's make this a little faster. Is the number between 21, between 20 and 80?
Are you going to guess all those numbers?
Yes.
Okay, well, you just killed all the kids. I'm sorry.
I'm a gambler. What can I say?
Well, that was quick. You wasted what would have been, I guess, $17 million until you would have gotten it wrong.
Okay.
All right, so remind me never to take you on a game show. Always get rid of it first. $5 million, I'm out. That's enough money. But I see you are a gambler.
Yeah. No, honestly, if real money's at stake, I just take the money and go. I'm like, thank you. Bye.
So you don't care about orphans' money. It's only real money.
I don't care about trying to increase it. I'm like, when they go, oh, we'll give you a chance to increase it if you do this extra thing, or you can just take the winnings. I'll take the winnings. Thank you.
All right. Well, you walked away with nothing, so thanks for playing, sir.
You're welcome.
Hopefully, our guest is a little more compassionate. He worked in healthcare for many years. He defended the rights of workers. He's worked in formation, and in fact, he has been a leader in our order. Welcome to the show, John Gutierrez. John, welcome.
Hi,
How do you
how
feel
doing?
about millions of dollars towards children?
I think it's great. It's great. When do we do it?
Yeah. Would you have picked a lower number than Tito picking 80 numbers?
Yes, I would have. I have to say.
See that?
I think I picked 60 numbers, 20 to 80.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, you picked 30 too many. I think
I
I
have-
would have picked like 15.
Okay, fair enough.
I have a different philosophy on gambling.
Oh yeah, what's that?
What is that?
Well, it's sort of like yours. Go until you get something. I actually went gambling once in Tahoe and won at the craps table enough money to buy the Franciscan supplement to my breviary.
Okay.
There you
To
go.
this day, I have that.
I
All
can't
right.
say I've ever heard of someone gambling to get a prayer book.
Yeah, no, neither have I. Neither have I.
Yep, I can say that not a big gambler myself. I've been to a casino one time before I entered the Friars. I played about 3 or 4 games. I won some money and realized, let's get out of here. So
Nice.
I think that's a success story.
I've been to Vegas twice. Never when I was 21, so I couldn't gamble. And I have no interest really in going in that. I like playing poker with friends, right?
Sure, cards are
five,
great.
Yeah, $5, $10, even $20 pot. But that's about as rich as I get with the gambling.
Yeah, you're talking about our stipend there.
Exactly.
I got to buy toothpaste.
There's not a lot for it.
Well, John, we generally don't talk about gambling all that much. We're here to talk about you. We're here to talk about your life. And one of the things we had learned about you, which I thought was really interesting, is that you did work in healthcare. You've worked a lot of time outside of the Friars in maybe ways that people wouldn't expect. How did you get into healthcare, and what exactly did you do?
I needed a job.
Good start.
Yep.
Yeah, really. I actually was in a community, and I felt it important. It was after formation. I felt important to be able to bring in support to the community. It was in a poor Hispanic parish in San Jose, real near my house, and but I didn't do anything in the parish, and so I felt like I couldn't ask the parish to help pay all my, my expenses. And so I went out and looked I had a couple of jobs, and then at one point I needed something pretty steady, and so they were hiring at the county hospital, and some friends of mine who were diocesan priests, they used to go to this hospital during summer to pick up jobs. And so they said, go down there, you can probably get a job. And I did, and I just did it for a short time while I was going to be there going to school, and it turned into 39 years.
Wow.
So,
Wow. So take a step back here, because I think a lot of people listening might be confused by this, because I think there's image that you join the Friars, you become a priest, and then, you're taken care of the rest of your life. But that's obviously not all of our life, and that doesn't apply to everyone. So why did you need to go out and get a job? Didn't the church take care of you?
well, the church took care of me, but they expected me to do something. That was something that we had set up in our legacy province too. It was during those times, there was a whole lot of stuff going on. It was about 6 years after Vatican II. And we had this idea that we wanted to live in communities, in neighborhoods, not necessarily institutions. And when we did that, somebody had to pay the rent. We lived in rented houses. And so you went out and got a job. And I had tried to get jobs that were going to be, I thought at that point, I had already felt like I wasn't called to ordination. And I thought, I'm going to be a counselor. And I had to go to school. And so I really felt like the community that I was living in was centered around this parish, but I needed to bring in something to support the community and to support the province in terms of paying my tuition. And so that's how I got into it. It was a sense that we were having at that time, that we needed to be responsible that way. So I'm not saying that the church or the province didn't take care of me.
Sure.
This is my, kind of like my obligation too.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
friars are to work, and
Right.
and I think even the friars who are priests who work at a parish, they receive a salary which we all share. But if you're not a priest, which is perfectly fine and a wonderful vocation in the order from the very beginning with St. Francis, the church is not just going to give you money to exist, which means we have to supply work somewhere, and so you decide to work in a hospital.
Yeah, that's at this time that was a big issue. I mean, in terms of developing, because those who weren't going to be priests, then you worked in the friar. You were the cook, you made the shoes, you were tailors, you kept the cars going, you kept the grounds, you cleaned the house. That's what the brothers did, the lay brothers, and because we're all brothers, and that was sort of in what was in basically the back of people's minds. And about the time that I was coming into formation, there was the idea that there were things to do and ways to serve and to spread the gospel that weren't around being ordained, and people were being trained to do that. And it was they used to call us the New Brothers. I remember one time we had a gathering of lay brothers, and they called us the New Brothers because we weren't in the background in the big convents. We were, we were going out and kind of getting trained in this or that.
It's funny. Go ahead, Tia.
This is interesting because something you said is reminding me of a conversation that I had in Cincinnati not too long ago, where a lot of the friars, when I asked them, older friars, why did you join? Like, what inspired you to join? And they all said, I got to know this friar or that friar. And almost every single one of them, it was a lay brother. And I pointed this pattern out. I was like, what do you think it was about the lay brothers that really inspired you so many vocations? And they all kind of said, because the priests were often celebrating masses, doing the liturgy and stuff like that, a lot of times, so you interacted more socially with the lay brothers. And I'm thinking about your work, going to work in a hospital, even though that's a work environment, it's a different kind of interaction than a lot of people have with friars. And I think it's whether it's more traditional lay brother work of working in the friary, keeping the grounds, maintaining the vehicle, or the new work that you're doing with the New Brothers. There's still this very human dimension of interacting with people.
Yeah.
Well, it's so easy to default to priesthood. I'm a friar priest, And so often you can just be, well, I'm a priest that wears brown. And when you take that away, your identity is the brotherhood. And I think maybe it comes out a little bit easier that you, not to say the priests don't live poverty, chastity, obedience, not to say that we don't follow Francis, but I think you're absolutely right, Tito. I remember having those great experiences with the lay brothers who understood humility, who understood the charism, because that's what they lived 24/7.
Yeah. I also remember that question was posed to me by a woman who was, she lived in, it was a secular institute called the Grail, and they had a house, lived a community life, and she was very, very involved in the parish with the friars that were there. And one day we were at some, social thing, and we were talking, and she said, well, you really should be in the parish with all the people. And I go, there was a lot of that sometimes going back and forth, discussions, you really want to be with the people. And all of a sudden I go, there's a lot of people in this parish who work in my hospital. And in our area, a lot of them were food service workers. They were the laundry workers. They were the janitors, and a lot of nurses' aides like me.
That's a curious statement. You have to be in the parish with the people. People don't just live in the parish.
In fact, they don't live in the parish.
Right.
But there's that idea that the church is the parish,
right?
And maybe there's the private life that's somewhere else, or it's an old model in which like the church was the ghetto, like that's where everyone lived, and that's where everyone had all of their social and political needs met, was the church.
Yeah.
That's simply not the case anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny, John. You mentioned before you're the kind of the new brothers, and I'm curious about this. If you got any pushback from this, there were a lot of the brothers in that generation that went on and got degrees, that ended up having careers, and I think in a wonderful way. But you weren't just the kind of simple put in the back lay brothers. And I remember a brother telling me about this. He had worked in accounting. He had gotten a degree in that, and he was a really great professional. And it just so happens he was cleaning the bathroom one day, just on his hands and knees scrubbing the bathroom, and a bishop was there walking by, and he said to another friar, "Oh, I've always wanted a lay brother in the house." And he got so angry, like, "I'm more than just a man who serves you." And I wonder if there was that tension among the lay brothers and priests early in your time, and if you felt that even between the maybe trade brothers and yourself as the new brothers.
Yeah. Well, between the kind of like the old brothers, there was a whole lot of support. I think they were feeling, they were saying, "Yeah, you go," and I really did feel support. I think there's one in Legacy, St. Barbara province. There's one who came in through that older system, probably one who's still alive, and he's still very vibrant. And he was like a mentor for me. He was just very supportive, and he was pushing me along. And I guess what I got from the friars who were priests was more a question. Why do you do this? How do you sort of fit it in? And it had to develop over years and years of being in the order and kind of seeing this.
Because there was kind of an idea, if you're capable of it, if you're intellectually, smart enough, why wouldn't you just become a priest? I think you felt that a lot. And even in my formation in the last 30 years, I've heard that guys get pressure of, well, the default position is priest, and if you're capable of the studies, you might as well do it. But it's a different vocation, and not everyone's called to it.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes out in these little sayings like, "Oh, when are you going to go on? When are you going to go on?
Finish. Do do the right thing." Yeah.
I haven't. I hear that very seldom now, but actually at this synod that we just had, somebody said, "Well, are you going to go on?" And I go, "No, I'm coming to the end."
Yeah. At what point do you graduate out of that question, though?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Even to this day, are you going to go on? That's. Oof.
Yeah.
I think there's a lack of. There's a struggle to recognize the vocation of brotherhood, which is sad because we're all called to that vocation, and we're also called, some of us, to priestly ministry. We're all called to some other kind of ministry or some other kind of work, but all of us, by virtue of being part of the fraternity, are called to be brothers.
Yeah. When you just said that, an area that I've kind of mulled over in my mind and struggled with and kind of developed my own theory is I don't like to talk about ministries, that we all have to have a ministry. Like people say, what ministry do you do? So I say, well, I don't, especially when I was working in the union, I work and I work for social justice, but I don't see those as ministries because I was seeing ministry being tied up very much with the organized church, the ecclesial church, which is a good thing, and that feeds me, that I'm a member of a Catholic community, a Catholic religious order, and all that is there to feed me to do what I do. And I saw that the ministry comes out of the ministry of Jesus Christ. And I remember once Ken Osborne, who was a theologian, said, all ministry is the ministry of Jesus Christ. And then I took from there, I said, well, what are the other members of the Holy Trinity doing? And God is the creator. And we are all creating a world. And that's where I saw my kind of spiritual oomph coming from, that I did the creation, and I didn't want to downplay ministry, but I really see it as work. And then my years with the union kind of developed stuff off of that, that people do work and that is an important thing. It's an important thing in their lives, and it's an important thing because the work they're doing is building the society or the kingdom, basically. And so, some people are preaching and guiding, they're teachers, they're priests, and all that. And some people are out doing it, and it's this relationship between the two.
Yeah,
And
I think
that's
too often we get caught up in jobs, right? We're not supposed to have a job, even if that job is parish priest. I mean, just fulfilling that position is not necessarily fulfilling. We're called, as you say, to follow Jesus. It's a vocation. And so am I evangelizing? Am I healing? Am I lifting up? Am I guiding? Am I engaging in the spiritual and corporal works of mercy? If that's our goal, then it doesn't matter if you're working for the institutional church from within or you're helping lead people to it from without, say in healthcare, but also say as a teacher, say as even a politician, a businessman, a mechanic. There's so many different positions that you could live that are just jobs in a sense, but are also opportunities to do all the works of mercy of Jesus.
Yeah. And I think we've given a bad reputation to it because like what I learned as a negotiator is people have jobs, and we had a very complex organization, and we represented all kinds of jobs in my bargaining unit. And we had the nurses' aides and the librarians and the surveyors for the county and mental health workers, just all kinds of people. We had the therapists, and people would come to the table to talk about their issues, and they always say, I'm a this, and this is what I give. And I learned over the years of sitting at the table and hearing them come and say, and this is what we need, and all that, people saying, this is important what I'm doing. This is, and I remember having a conversation with one of the brothers, and he was an ordained brother, and he said something about like, well, maybe you'll just get a job like doing the roads. And I turned to him and said, Danny, the guy who does the roads makes it possible for you to go to visit somebody in the hospital. They do that, and that's what they do for the kingdom.
Yeah. Who could be an eye and say to the foot that we don't need you, right? Like, I feel like this sounds familiar.
Yeah.
So St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 12, we are one body, and every part plays its part. And so I think that's great. I don't think you want to define your whole being based on your work, obviously, but your work has an important contribution to the greater society, and that's wonderful. Yeah. And I think especially, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago with Jimmy Bay in Novitiate right now, that there's a sense sometimes that people want to work just to make a paycheck and they hate work. But in reality, work can be very fulfilling, and you can feel like you're a part of something greater than yourself, and you're contributing to the society in a way that's beneficial to other people besides just me and my paycheck.
That's, if I can use a current example, we're seeing federal workers all over the nation saying, I've been let go, and what I do is, check out bird flu, or I help against nuclear accidents and stuff like that. People really have a sense that what they do contributes. Oftentimes people do get into this thing of, oh, it's just a job. But I think by and large, you're at work 8 hours every day. That's the standard. You sleep for 8 and you have 8 hours to do what you want. That was the 8-hour day thing. And just like when you're there for so long, and I used to talk to people about this. I go to work, but it takes me maybe an hour. I used to live far away, so it was about 2 hours before I went to work that I had to start thinking about it. And then when you're working in the hospital, there's a whole lot that happens during the day that you can't deal with at the time. My own feelings and stuff like that, especially when I was in the emergency room. And so I used to work the evening shift. I got off of work at 11:30. It was about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour drive home. And that time, work was right present with me as I was driving home, because I'm working out what went on that day. And so and then when I got home, so in a certain sense, you tack on a couple hours at the end of the 8.
Yeah. It becomes your whole life. And so it might as well be something fulfilling, something that you feel a calling to, rather than just, oh, I've got to get through this so I can do my fun thing. Well, your fun thing may never come.
Yeah. And also, you do have the days when I got to get through this. I can't wait until it's time to clock out.
And I'm sure that happens a lot in a hospital or in some kind of medical facility. I remember a very brief summer that I spent doing CPE. There were some days where it was awesome. There were some days that I was so drained emotionally, psychologically at the end of the day. I mean, I can only imagine, what you must have experienced during your time.
Yeah, there were really powerful experiences in that. There were actually also, like in the union, just some things that happened when I said, this is right. This is right and just. So, and that was exciting. I really felt like I was benefiting, the kingdom where I was, and that's what I was asked to do as a disciple, and that's what the friars are asked to do. And so, I began to have the feeling, at one time I had a feeling that I was kind of like on the outs and on the edge with the community, and I really soon found that I was kind of in the middle of it.
Wow.
Well, you have an opportunity to settle an argument that I've had with a friend. Tito and I have a mutual friend who works in medical care. She's a really brilliant doctor, and we fought over the years whose job is harder. Because I tell her all the time that being a doctor is incredibly difficult. Working in hospitals is beyond my capability. She thinks that being a friar, and specifically a priest, is very, very difficult, and she could never do that. I have vacations. I have days off. I don't work 12-hour shifts. I think it's pretty easy to say that doctors work much harder than I do. But I'm curious, do you have a take on this?
I see everybody has a challenge in their work and a difficulty.
I'm seeing a very friar answer.
This is a very diplomatic answer, yes.
One of the things that I used to feel when I lived in a formation house in Berkeley, and I would work, and I used to come home in the evening, and I didn't have to do papers, And the guys who were there, their job was to go to school. So they would be in their rooms doing papers, and I'd be sitting by the TV or on the phone or something like that. But when I would talk about, sometimes at dinner, and I talked about what I did that day, they would be horrified.
I just sat in a boring lecture. You held
Yeah.
someone alive in your hands.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to do verbatims or anything like that?
No, no, that wasn't part of
Okay.
my job. I know about verbatims because I studied. I thought I was going to be a counselor, so I was taking classes, and we had to do the repeat back and
Right.
but
Yeah,
if you
so
had
tell
to
us
do-
about you had kind of two jobs here. You say you,
Right.
you worked at the health personnel, but you also worked for the union in the hospital. This is something that I think, again, might challenge people's expectations of a friar. To voice some of their, isn't that too political? What are you doing involved with a union? Yet, explain yourself.
well, it is political.
Yeah,
You know,
isn't that too political? The
politics
church
is
shouldn't
part
be
of our
involved with
world.
that.
Yeah, it's part of our world. You know, but yeah, it is. Whenever you have people together, they have groups, they have concerns, they have ways of expressing them, and they have ways of working things out. That's politics, and you know, yeah, I got involved in the union because my dad was always a union member, and he said, well, sometimes I don't like it, but he says it's the only protection that we have as working people, and you always belong to your union. So when I got a job there, we had a union, and I joined the union. I didn't do much, and then at one time we had some really difficult issues on the floor, and I ended up being part of a group that organized a sick out, which I'm never supposed to admit to because we got off kind of lightly. But
Okay.
but we did this, and that was sort of my introduction to the activism, you know. And I think over the years, some of the abilities I have is to kind of like maybe speak out. People call that leadership, and I ended up being the leader of the nurses' aides that were part of this group. We had nurses' aides, and the clerical staff, and we did this sick out for a week, and it was very difficult because it's hard to get people to say, I'm not going to go work and take care of my patients. So we had developed a thing. We called in. We had lots of people in the hospital. We knew we would call them. How's it going? Is anybody suffering? And they say, no, it's kind of going slow. And so we stayed out, and then we went in on the last day. We all marched in together. Those of us that were on shift came dressed for work. Everybody else all came, and we presented our grievances to the management. Well, they weren't happy about it, but
Well, no, of course not.
Right.
but
But the church supports this, and for
Yeah.
for 150 years has defended unions, has defended the right to strike, defended the right to demand justice. And I think it is political, and some people find that to be disruptive. But sometimes you have to be disruptive to unjust systems. And so,
Yeah.
if people are not receiving their fair wage, which is a natural right, if people are being abused, if they don't have safe working conditions, these are things against the human dignity of the person. And the church doesn't flinch in saying, yeah, you need to defend yourself.
yeah.
Are
And
you
in healthcare or other helping kind of, well, yeah, I'll just use those as an example. You also have to advocate for the quality of care you're able to give, you know, and if so that they're piling work on you, and now you have to do this, and now you have to do that. What is going to be the quality for the experience of the person who's looking for healing? And
Are
those
you
some
able
of the
to give a
issues
couple
we
of
have.
examples? I don't want to, anything scandalous, but are you able to give a couple of examples of what exactly is you were fighting for? Like, what are some of the rights that, if you can recall them, that you're saying, hey, we want more of this or fewer of these, or can we get more parity in this? What can you give a couple examples?
One of the things in that situation that we asked for was a whole teaching component, because those, especially the nurses, this was for the nurses, but they were supposed to teach someone who's quadriplegic how to take care of themselves at home and their family. And we the nurses' aides did a lot with the family, teaching them this is how you do that. And you were supposed to do that as well as get the patients up for therapy. And if they needed to be cleaned up, you had to stop and do that, all the other stuff. And then you were supposed to keep the room clean. And so what we said is we want a program of education so that that can be taken care of, and then we can augment it. and eventually that became a whole part of the rehab program, and they published a book, and now it's used throughout the nation, as a way to train families and patients. But that was a small thing. We just said, we've got to do certain things to the patient, and it's important to teach them, but we can't do both.
Right.
Yeah, I think often you see unions in the world, or people portray them as greedy. All they
Right.
want is more money and less work.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's the case, right? Human nature is sometimes flawed. But I think sometimes it's a genuine concern for the work they do. People like to work. People have an opportunity to contribute to society and like to feel productive. It's really degrading when your work is more difficult or you're not actually making a difference. We've talked about this before on this podcast, but I think people know that giving people more money doesn't actually give them more happiness.
Right.
Giving them an opportunity to make a difference does. And so what you're talking about here is it turned out to be a book, but it allowed people to care for their people better, who could then care for themselves. That's wonderful. And yeah, you fight for that. Say, let me do my job well.
And I just find it interesting that they had to fight for the ability to give better care and have a more balanced approach. That's why I asked for an example, because I think a lot of people get caught up in the struggles for more money or the struggles for fewer hours, and they forget there's a lot of things that unions fight for. Chief among them is, how do we do the job better? How do we do it more safely? A lot of times.
Yeah, and just also listening to the people who are doing the work. I understand what administrators have to do, and probably the biggest problem was our next big supervisor, because she was ignoring it. And we were saying, this is just getting to us. Here we are at the bedside. And so one of the things that is part of unionism is those who are doing the work have to have a say and say, well, this is the way the day goes, and it might not fit what is, planned for. So how can we adjust? And, how do we adjust times when we spend with families, teaching them how to get their family member in and out of a car while other things are happening. I did organizing with the union among, home care workers, but also nursing home workers. And I got sent to Detroit. And the people there, the nurses' aides like me who worked there, were given like 12, 13 patients to take care of. These are elderly patients, and they were running back and forth.
Yeah,
And they
it
were
requires a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you say, well, we want better wages for them, that's where you get, they just want more money. And so and the thing is, often in the nursing homes, it's a way where young people want to get into healthcare. They start their jobs there, but they quickly go to the big hospitals, to the acute hospital. But I worked with a lot of people who worked there for many, many years, and they were really dedicated to taking care of the elderly. That was their job. That was their point in life. And that was an important thing to see, that they had something to contribute, and they wanted to contribute in the best way possible.
Yes, so you did this for a long time. You worked in healthcare. You worked as union. You said, was it 39 years?
Yeah, 39 years.
39 years. What was your favorite part of that? What sustained you for so long?
Being able to combine the two was really good. When I worked in rehab, the rehab work was pretty standard. And, I knew I could walk into any rehab room and know what I had to do, know who were the difficult patients to turn and all that, what I could do.
Difficult patients.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was just dealing with the body, Then spinal cord injury patients who I worked with, they have full use of their minds, and they're really angry. So yeah, then there was that part of the difficult patient.
Yeah.
And you had to wake them up and do all that. I could go right into a room and do that. And for so many years, I was real happy just doing that. And I got real involved in the work of negotiating and representing workers at grievances and that, that kind of stuff. At a certain point, I always wanted to go to the ER. And when I went to the ER, that's a totally different, in rehab, I would work with patients at the beginning, sometimes for 4 months, the same patient, same family.
Yeah, a lot more
And
stability. You see growth. You see
yeah,
progress.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the ER, I would get a group of patients in my team, an area, and I'd get my break and I'd come back and I would have all new patients.
Oh my gosh,
Wow. Yeah.
You know,
constant turnover.
Yeah.
yeah. So, but I really kind of like that. A lot of times people say in the ER, there's a lot of adrenaline junkies. And in a certain sense, I see that in myself. I'm
Oh
better.
yeah.
Yeah.
You ever been
I'm better.
skydiving? Rowing a
Well,
motorcycle?
oh, never a motorcycle. That's not too many not good.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like in my life, I couldn't be a teacher. If I have to sit there and make a plan as to what I'm going to do for the next hour, I don't do that. But give me a screaming kid, or give me,
Oh, there's screaming kids in school. Yeah, but yeah, the adaptability,
Yeah.
the
you
chaos.
say,
You get to
"Oh,
just run
this
with it.
kid- This kid needs a splint on their arm, and they're going to make me do it because the doctor wants to come in and see it all done. So I'm going to be there with the family member going, "Oh, you're hurting him," and I'm saying, "Well, we're trying not to," and those kind of things, And then next, you'd have somebody saying, "I think I'm going to have a baby now," you know. All of those things changing, and then there would be a trauma that'd be flying in a patient,
Yeah.
and yeah. So I
One of
really
those
like
things about
that.
hospitals. Everyone needs them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter your ethnicity. It doesn't matter your background. Everyone's gonna
Yeah.
need one eventually.
And you're with. I used to say, think about it this way: take everybody in a certain area who's having the worst day of their life, and now put them in the same place.
That's true. That's perspective. Did you grow patience in that, or did you grow bitter sometimes? Like, what is wrong with these people?
Well, in the moment, you'd say, depending, like you'd look at. I remember one time had a guy who was on a hold because he had said he was going to kill himself, and he was a big baby, and I was dealing with a grandmother who brought her kid in because she took care of the kid for the mom who had to work, and the kid is having seizures,
Oh, gosh.
and they finally kind of got him to go home, ready to go home, and the grandmother went out, and when he got to the car, he had a seizure. She came with him in her arms, and
Oh my gosh.
I'm going, and then this other guy is yelling, "Well, who's going to take care of me?" And yeah, I lost it, and he was yelling. I love this story. He was yelling in the back, "Is anybody going to come in here?" And he goes, and there was like no response, and I was dealing with this grandmother and her little kid, and she, and then at one point he just yells out, "Well, will somebody call me a cab?" And I say, "Okay, you're a cab." It's an old
Dad humor in a
Groucho
time like that. All right.
Yeah, it was old Groucho Marx comment that I waited my entire life to say. And the charge nurse who's supposed to keep all these things moving, she was a great nurse, but she just had this dour look. And she broke out laughing. And everybody came up
Got to
me,
her.
Yeah.
and they go, "Look, you made her laugh."
The charge nurse, that's a tough job.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a really tough job. As you said, she has to keep everything going. And I don't blame her for having a dour look because
Yeah.
she needs people to do what she says when she says to do it.
Yeah, when she says to do it.
Yeah.
And she says, "Move that patient over there." And I learned, if she said it, you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's two sides to this. There's the kind of defense mechanisms. There's the setting up a very stone face and keeping things at arm's length. That you see traumatic things, and you don't want to take the trauma home with you. The other side is to have some kind of gallows humor. Did you find that you leaned one side or the other, or did you have another way of coping?
I used the gallows humor because my coworkers used it.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever became dour, but I could become. I knew that, and one of the things people used to say is that I kept a very even temper, and I know I can do that. and there were just situations where, you know, I really had to do that. I remember we would get people coming in with the police, and they were all drugged out and screaming and yelling, and they had to be put in restraints. And they're yelling and screaming, saying horrible things to you. And the ambulance folks, they've been sitting in this little car with this person screaming awful things at them. So when they get out, they're pretty hepped up, and then the staff gets in there, and this person's screaming and kicking and over there, and everybody is getting all. So I found that my position was just to be real quiet. So I had one position where usually it was somebody who was big, I'd hold them down so that they could put on the restraints, and then I would sit them up, and then I say, I'll do the vitals, because everybody else was like at wit's end. And so I just been there calm, and that's something that I found that was a thing, and people used to notice that I did that, and I'd be standing in the same position vis-a-vis the gurney, and try, and so I think that was something that I brought. But yeah, you also did the gallows humor.
Sure. It sounds like a sense of Franciscan spirituality in a subtle way. It seems like you brought that peace and that calm and that kind of accepting people as they were and trying to find the good in it all. You didn't exactly have to come out and preach necessarily to get that message out, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. People always say, oh, well, Brother John, he's kind of slow going.
Slow
In
going.
fact, when I first worked there, I had a coworker, and he had worked there for a long time, and he was really good at the ER stuff. But I remember he used to call me Slow Mo,
Okay.
and I said, "Yeah, but I'm getting there. I'll get there."
Did you ever work in your habit while you were there, or did you dress, in quote unquote professional attire?
No, I had to. We had a dress code. I had to wear.
Yeah.
When I first started working, I used to have to wear white pants, and then
Wow.
toward the end, I used to use a scrub top. I used to use painter pants because they were, good utility. But no, I never wore my habit at work, and I realized that people never saw me in my habit. When I made solemn vows, some people I worked with came to the solemn vows. In the union, I did. I used to have to give one of my jobs would be to give the blessing before the meal or the benediction at the end, and I did that and wore my habit.
I asked because when I was doing CPE, we had a dress code as well, shirt and tie, but we were told during on calls when we were serving doing an on call stretch, we could wear clerics or we could continue to wear a shirt and tie. And myself and Jay, who were doing it together, we were told we could wear a habit. And we decided to wear our habits during the on call because it for the people who recognized it opened them up, and unlike a cleric, which when you're wearing a clerical collar and you walk in a hospital, sometimes people get nervous. But the people who didn't recognize it instead were curious, like, "What are you? What's
this costume,
What's
bro?"
this?" And so it gave us something to talk about to ease into the conversation of how they were doing, what they were struggling with, and how we could help.
Yeah. The one time I wore a habit to a hospital was for the union, and I was helping out on a campaign it was a Catholic hospital, and it was typical. They had a union busting company representing, and all that, and so I got a call from an organizer who I knew over the years, and who was a good friend of another friar who has died. And he said, can you come and help out today? And we're going to go around talking. And he said, and I said, yeah. And he says, could you wear your habit? And I was thinking, well, I don't know, and all this. And he goes, well, Brother Ed, he would have worn his habit. And Brother Ed was a good friend of mine, and he had died. And so I said, oh, he's shaming me.
There's a whole lot of manipulation going on here.
Yep.
But I did, and it was really, really a good thing that I did. A lot of the workers they were trying to organize were immigrants from Central America, and they understood the habit. And I felt really good, like they know that the church is on their side, And also, we had set up to have like a little union meeting in the cafeteria around a table, which all is very legal, but there was this show of force from the hospital management, and they even called the police. And so part of what I was there for is, are they going to arrest the priest or the friar? And
Yeah.
and they just stayed on the side, and we had our little meeting, and the people that came to that meeting and sat, it was just like a little lunch chat. They were very brave because the management was seeing who they were, so it was
It's
a
an
powerful
interesting
moment.
dynamic there. And when we talk about the habit, and Tio bring this up, obviously you weren't going to wear it working in a hospital, and
Right.
there's a practicality to that, but that doesn't mean you're not living your vocation, as we've talked about. But there's something about this power dynamic of the habit, because obviously it's a sign of humility, and it's a sign of service, and it's just the clothes of a penitent. And yet in our society, it also bears a lot of power and respect, and it has a place in the church of authority. And so how do we manage that? And I think what you're talking about here is sometimes leveraging our privilege, we could say. You're saying, like, I'm trying to be humble, but I recognize this gives me some authority, but I'm not going to use the authority for me. I'm going to use it for others. I'm going to put myself in situations that may not be for my best benefit, but I'm going to use what I can for others.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully that's at our best what we do.
And in California, it has a little punch to it.
Sure. The history is
Yep.
is even more mixed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to the beginning, going back to your vocation as brother, you did 39 years working outside the church, and then it seems from what you've said, you've worked very much inside the church. You had internal ministry. You worked in formation and something else. What has your life been the last how many years?
Well, the last say 6 years have been heavily formation, and it was my second go round in it. I was in the late '80s and '90s. I was a formation director, and then I was out of that for a while, and then I got back into it because I got elected to the definitorium, the council, a second time. I was doing a repeat on that, and we needed a postulancy director, and I said, well, you can put my name there as a placeholder.
Oh,
And,
please. We all know what that means.
yeah, exactly.
It means they're not going to look for anyone else.
Yeah. And it was there, and so I said, well, I won't say no to it. And then I realized that at that point on the council, where everybody on the council I had either been a director for or lived with as their guardian while they were in formation. And
Well, that's a vote of confidence if you still got it.
yeah, and I had to say, I can't just say I won't say no. I got to say yes and mean
All
it.
right.
Well, that's
So-
better than Joe Nangle. I don't know if you ever met Joe Nangle. Just
I did,
passed
yeah.
away a few months ago. He was my postulancy director for just 9 months. And it was because a guy got transferred. We needed someone to come in. He was on the council. And as he says it, he was in the bathroom when they made the decision.
Exactly.
Never
Yeah.
miss a meeting, and never go to the bathroom during a
That's
meeting.
Decisions are made by those who show up.
Exactly. But doing formation and also being on the council, I saw as a way to serve the brothers. And we talked earlier about the brothers who cleaned and, took care of the cars and all that. And they served the brotherhood. And in those days, it got sort of whittled down to they served the real ministry, which was the parishes. And now I really see that what we have from both lay brothers and clerics is we serve the brotherhood, to help the whole brotherhood do what is ours to do. And so, a lot of people would never like to be on, like an executive committee where you go to meetings and you have to read budgets and stuff like that. And I figured I had done that. It's something that I can do,
Yeah, as much as we'd love to be, 100 merry men that just kind of go off and live by the seat of our pants, and the poor will serve and the people will take care of us.
Yeah.
The reality is, it's not 1245.
Right.
We live in a world where we have to have health insurance,
Yep.
and we have to have car insurance, and we have to have 401ks, not for our personal benefit, but for the sick and the aged and the formation, and
Right.
someone's got to do that. And so it's a great service so that others can go out and do parish work. Some people got to do those other things, and so you served the people in hospitals, and then you served the brothers.
Yeah. There's a great interdependence, which I think is really vital to the whole community, to the friars, that we really do depend on one another, and that we tie our lives together.
I think it's to put it kind of succinctly, the order has to be managed so that the fraternity can go out and do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not seeing it as an escape from fraternity, but in
Right.
fact is ministry, and it is work, and it is fraternity, as you were saying before. Just because you weren't working in a parish doesn't mean it wasn't work.
Right.
There's a vocation to being, in some ways, and I don't mean this in any sort of way that would be negative, because Francis used this language, to be the mother,
Yeah.
to be the one who takes care of the children. I think that's a beautiful vocation. It certainly, being a mother is real work. And I think some of the friars have that responsibility.
I think a good analogy for that is the hermitage style that we have that
Right.
Francis wrote for us of Mary and Martha. Mary sat at the feet of Jesus and listened. Martha took care of the community, took care of the people there, and that's our model. But what I find intriguing is the very first time you go on hermitage, you have to be Mary. You have to be taken care of, because that's how you learn how to take care of others. And I think there's a real sense of relationship in that Francis kind of intuited and put into that style of hermitage for us, and tried to inject into our sense of fraternity as well.
Yeah.
I say it to guys all the time who are discerning priesthood. You got to be a sheep before you can be a shepherd.
Yeah.
You got to sit through some bad homilies. You got to have your needs not met
That's
to
gonna
understand who you got to go to. Yeah.
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 And so you understand the importance of preparing your homilies.
Yeah.
Yeah, or how people can be stung if you don't respond to a phone call, or that you ignore a meeting, or you're short with someone. You got to understand, wow, I have a lot of power that I'm wielding here to take care of someone. And putting it in a better way, I have a lot of responsibility entrusted to me.
Yeah.
And I found that, like, in doing formation, you what we really do is just accompany people, but you really kind of got to stick with it, and you got to be there for not the times of all the theological reflections and stuff like that. You got to be there when two people are not getting along, and they go, how is this community going to go on if you guys can't come to some sort of, or you're just sitting with someone who wants to know, who's asking a real basic question about their life and stuff. And
Yeah, the idea of accompaniment is so important, and it's so important in everything, in family life, in parish life, in fraternal life. We want people to be the way we want them to be. We want to mold them and force them into it, but it's just never going to work. Sometimes you just got to walk with people when they fall, let them see that they've fallen, maybe help them up, maybe help them learn from it. But I think putting in too hard a guidepost sometimes will eventually just push people away from us.
yeah.
Well, brother, thank you so much, not just for our call, but for your service to the Friars, for the wonderful work you've done over all these years. It's great to see you. What are you doing right now? What's next?
Like today, I'm going to go get lunch.
In your life?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I'm here at this house because we had three guys who are from other provinces, 2 from Vietnam, 1 from Mexico, and they're studying at FST, and this is where they live. So part of my job here is to just make sure the community is moving along, and it's, we're providing, what they need. So I can't go do the shopping, but I got to make sure that, we have a way to do it, and that, just all that. Somebody said the other day, you're like the house mother.
There you go.
There you go.
Once again, we've got a continued care, brotherhood, motherhood.
Yeah.
There's definitely a vocation to you. So, brother, thank you so much. Keep it up. Hope to see you sometime soon.
Well, thank you for asking me to be part of this.
Absolutely.
All right.
So, Tito, I just love that image, just to hit on this one more time, of mother.
Yeah.
And we talked about it comes from Francis, but often we think ourselves as brothers, and we are equals, and we do have that sense of camaraderie. But sometimes we need to be served, and sometimes we need to serve others. And it's a hierarchy, not that one's better than the other, but one goes lower than the other. One goes on their hands and knees and washes the feet as Jesus did.
That's right. It's something that either can get distorted or overlooked a lot of times, unfortunately, but it's really important and an important part of our life, the sense of service and taking care of others. And as you said, the importance of being taken care of. That's something that I think I personally struggle with is I'm great. I'm like, yeah, I'll take care of people. And then someone's like, well, can I take care of you? I'm like, no, I'm good.
What's interesting, and going back to the very beginning, for those who may not understand maybe our frustration, this idea of, are you going to be just a brother or are you going to be a priest?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with a mother. Are you going to be just a mother?
Right.
Or are you going to do something with your life?
Ugh.
And it's like, I imagine a lot of people can, now I get it, right? So like that's basically what that question is. Like, no,
Right.
Being a mother is enough, and there's something very beautiful about that vocation. And in fact, it might be the greatest vocation. And I think something about being a brother, being a servant, being the one who cares for other people, yeah, that's fantastic. Being a priest is great,
Yep.
but it's not the only thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use my own mom as an example. My mom worked out of necessity, but for the first several years of my life and my sister's life, she was at home all the time. And, she took care of the house. Our house was immaculate, and we always had the best food because my mom was there constantly maintaining and taking care of the house, of us. She would help my sister and I with homework. I mean, that was her whole life. And then only when it was necessary because of finances and difficulties, then she'd go, okay, I'm going to go get a job now. And she's been working ever since. But if you asked her, her first job, her most important job is being a mom.
Yeah. And it's not a main character. It's not one that everyone thinks of.
Nope.
Yet another minor character worth rising up in a world of main characters. Everybody out there, be a minor character.